Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, we are previewing the upcoming season for the Los Angeles Lakers. Shout out to Aaron Hockey for requesting that I preview the season for this team. If you want me to preview the season for your team, let me know in the comments down below. Before I get too far into this though, I would like to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all the support that I've been receiving on these videos lately, and I hope to see that continue. Without further ado, let's talk about the Lakers. Before I can actually start previewing the season for the Lakers, though, I have to reflect upon and discuss the transactions that this team made in the offseason. And they certainly had an eventful offseason, to say the least. It started when they traded Dennis Schroeder. They traded for Dennis Schroeder while giving up Danny Green and their first-round pick, which was the 28th overall pick, to the Oklahoma City Thunder. This was a move that I liked quite a bit because Schroeder added a much-needed role to this team as a shot-creating guard who can get your team buckets and allow them to be productive offensively when Anthony Davis and LeBron James are not on the court. Next, they they signed Wesley Matthews to a 1-year, $3.6 million deal. I think that this is a solid move, but I don't think that it's as good of a move as some people do. I think Matthews has gotten a little overrated just because he was a starter on the Bucks, even if I don't think he was that high of an impact player. We'll talk about him a bit more later, though. After that, they signed Montrezl Harrell to a 2-year, $18 million deal. Once again, this is a move that I think has been a bit overrated. I think that it was a great value get for the Lakers, but I don't necessarily think that it's great for them positionally. They then traded JaVale McGee and a second-round pick for Jordan Bell and Alfonzo McKinnie. Bell has since been released, but they mostly did this in order to free up the cap space to make their final signing of the offseason, which was Marc Gasol on a 2-year, $5.2 million deal. Once again, I think that this deal has been a bit overrated. People are acting like it's going to win the championship for the Lakers, but really, I think it was a nice deal, and I think Marc Gasol is a very good value at only $2.6 million for the next 2 seasons, but I also don't think that he's going to be as high of an impact player as he was both on the Raptors and as people expect him to be with the Lakers. Now that we have reviewed the off-season transactions for the Lakers, let's preview the upcoming season. During this segment, I will be explaining my expectations and thoughts for each player on the current roster, and at the end, I will summarize all those thoughts and put together some predictions for the upcoming season for the squad. As usual, we'll start with the point guard position, and I'll be considering LeBron James a wing for this exercise, but at the point guard, we'll start with Dennis Schroeder. Like I said, this was easily my favorite move that the Lakers made this offseason. I think that Schroeder brings a whole nother element to this team as a shot-creating point guard. People have said that it might not have been worth giving up a first-round pick as well as another player that the Thunder were able to turn into a second first-round pick in exchange for Dennis Schroeder. But I do buy Schroeder as a three-point shooter. Schroeder as a shooter. People have made it sound like last year could have been a fluke, and while I'm not necessarily certain that he'll be able to replicate the same 38% mark that he hit from 3 last year, I do think that he will once again shoot it at a high level. I think the primary reason for his jump last year was that he had one of the greatest shot creators in NBA history creating looks for him in Chris Paul. I'm not sure why people expect that to change as he comes over to the Lakers, where he will have yet again another fantastic playmaker in LeBron James. So I do expect Schroeder to continue to shoot the ball at a high level, and I also think that the other flaw in his game, which would be his defense, has also been a bit maligned a little bit further than it should be. He fights hard on the defensive end of the floor, and overall I think he does a pretty good job of playing his role and keeping guys in front of him, limiting easy buckets from his matchup. the advanced statistics simply don't like him because he's not able to manufacture steals and blocks due to him just not being that kind of explosive athlete. However, I think that his intangibles on the defensive end of the floor are pretty good. He does a nice job in rotations, and on the ball, he doesn't give up easy looks. So I do think that overall, that whole thing has been blown a little bit out of proportion, and I think that he can do a solid job on both ends of the court. I think that that trade was a really nice move for the Lakers, and I think that Schroeder is going to help them a lot in this coming season. At the backup point guard position, we have Alex Caruso, one of the more loved players in the entire NBA. Caruso is a really good defender at the point of attack, does a magnificent job of limiting what opposing guards can do on the offensive end of the floor. And he's also a pretty good rebounder for a guard, which is something that goes overlooked sometimes. On the offensive end is where he struggles a little bit. He's a pretty decent shot creator, but he does struggle with turnovers. He's a bit more turnover prone than you would like to see from a player whose usage level is as low as Alex Caruso's is. He also is not as good of a shooter as some people seem to think that he is. He's pretty much league average, and he was actually below average during the playoffs, which was a bit surprising for me to read because watching the games, it looked like he shot the ball really well, but overall, he only shot at 27.9% from three during the Lakers' championship run. That's good enough, though, and because he's not afraid to fire away from range, he still is going to create spacing for his teammates. I like Alex Caruso quite a bit, and I think that he's a good role player on a good team. I'm just not sure that he's a starter, and he isn't even being asked to be that on this Lakers team. So overall, I think he's in a great position to succeed, and I think that we'll continue to see Alex Caruso be one of the more fun players in the NBA just because of how lovable a guy he is. The third point guard on this roster is Quinn Cook. Cook is a sharpshooter, shoots the ball really well from the three-point line, has had multiple seasons where he shot it over 40% from range. He doesn't do much outside of that. He's a decent playmaker, but he's not a really good threat off the bounce, cannot really create those open shots for his teammates, and that doesn't allow him to utilize that playmaking ability to the max. On the defensive end, he's also a liability due to his slender and small frame. But as a third point guard, he has a really above average jump shot, which is a good skill to have. And in the limited minutes he plays, he will still be able to be a threat on the court because of that jumper. Next, we'll talk about the wing position. And clearly, when you talk about wings on the Los Angeles Lakers, it's pretty clear where you need to start. LeBron James. The guy is one of the top two greatest players of all time. By my estimation, he's probably number two, but I don't really want to get into that. Overall, though, LeBron is a terrific player. He scores the ball at an elite level. He's terrific in transition, one of the better players when he has a head of steam going to the basket. He's a really good rebounder for a forward, does a really good job of grabbing the ball and pushing it in transition from there. He's pretty good on the defensive end of the floor, certainly not at the same level he was during his peak years, but he still does a good job on that end, and on particular possessions when he really turns it up, he's one of the greatest defenders in the entire league. As long as we see him continue to give the same effort on the defensive end of the floor that he did in this past season, he will continue to be impactful on that end of the court. Where we've really seen LeBron improve in the recent seasons has been in his playmaking. Last season, we saw him take a humongous jump in his playmaking numbers. He had a 49% assist percentage, which is absolutely terrific. I believe it led the league by a significant margin. LeBron is terrific. He's the best player in the league, and he is the primary reason why this Lakers team is going to be a top-tier championship competitor for next season. The next wing to talk about here is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Caldwell-Pope is a 3-and-D wing, pretty standard in that role, but he does a good job of it. He did an especially good job in the finals, and that led to him getting a pretty humongous payday. While I do think it was a bit of an overpay for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he is worth a lot as a 3-and-D contributor, shoots the three ball at a high level, 38% from the three-point line in this past season. Does a solid job defensively, not exactly a stopper by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly does his job in rotations and can take on some more challenging matchups at the guard and forward positions. Overall, just a good player that does his job. Good move by the Lakers to keep him around. I think that he will continue to be an important player for this team moving forward as they try to defend their championship. Wesley Matthews, like I said before, I think that he was a great value signing for the Lakers at $3.6 million. I think that he was probably worth a bit more than that, but he's not necessarily a terrific player that's going to change the fortunes of this team and increase their ceiling by any stretch. While he does do a decent job defensively, he's not the stopper that some people make him out to be. He did an okay job on Jimmy Butler last season, but he wasn't by any stretch shutting him down in that playoff series. On the offensive end, he's pretty much league average from the three-point line, shot at 36% last year, and that is with Giannis creating wide open looks for him throughout the regular season. I get that he will probably be able to maintain that same production from three with LeBron and Anthony Davis creating looks for him now, but I also just don't think that he's a genuine sharpshooter, so I don't think that he'll improve the floor spacing for the Lakers all that significantly. However, he's a player that you can trust out there in the playoffs to make good defensive rotations, not turn the ball over on the offensive end of the floor, and not take stupid shots. That's an important player to have, and he can also guard some of the better players in the NBA. Not at the elite level that some people think he can, but he's certainly competent in taking on more difficult matchups. The next wing I want to talk about here is Kyle Kuzma. Kuzma is yet another Laker player that I view as overrated. Imagine that. I don't get it. I don't get it with Kyle Kuzma. He can score the ball at a decent rate. He's a pretty good finisher in the rate, shot a monstrous 78% within 3 feet of the rim last season, which is terrific. Really good finisher at the rim, but outside of that, he's not much of a scorer. Shoots the ball at a below average rate. Not a great playmaker whatsoever. Can't really create shots for himself or his teammates. On the defensive end, he struggles. When he's really giving a lot of effort, he can get up to being at least okay on defense, but when he's not giving effort, which is most of the time, he's a liability defensively. So overall, I don't see how that player is anything more than an end of the bench, get a couple minutes, playoff rotation type guy. But it seems like people keep trying to push the envelope that he can be better than that, so we'll see what happens. Next is Markieff Morris. Morris, I'm not sure I buy the jump shot completely. He shot it very well in the playoffs, 42% from three. I think that he's much more of a league average and even maybe slightly below league average shooter throughout a larger sample size. But he does bring good effort defensively. He's not necessarily great on that end of the floor, which some people seem to make him out to be, but he does well in team rotations. He's a decent rim protector, and he's a pretty good rebounder for a forward. So the combination of those things certainly make him a viable rotation piece for a contender. They signed him for the minimum, so you certainly can't object with that, but I also think that he's not a game changer by any stretch of the imagination. I also think I've said by any stretch of the imagination about 4 times in this video, so please excuse that. The next guy is Talen Horton-Tucker. I have some high hopes for Horton-Tucker, not quite the high hopes that Lakers fans seem to have for him when they say that he's a future all-star, but I do think that he certainly can be a rotational guy due to his extreme amount of athleticism and bounciness. He has a plus wingspan, and those traits alone are going to allow him to be a pretty good defensive player. On offense, if he can get the jump shot to go in at a higher level, combined with his athleticism and ability to finish at the rim, although it is mostly with his right hand, he has to get better with his left. Then I think that he certainly has a chance to be a rotation type guy in the NBA with a chance to maybe reach starter if he can iron out that jumper. Jared Dudley is the next player. He's a pretty good defender still at this old age, which is impressive, but he brings absolutely nothing to the rebounding. He's a complete minus in that aspect of the basketball. And on offense, he can't do anything when it comes to shot creation or playmaking, but he does shoot the ball at a pretty high level. I think he was around a 40% shooter from three last season, which is certainly pretty good. He doesn't have much value outside of that, though, along with his stellar defense. And as we saw in the playoffs, he's not really a guy who's playable in a playoff rotation. However, he's still a good leader and someone that's good to have on the end of the bench as a nice veteran presence. So I think it was a good move by the Lakers to keep him around for the minimum. Last wing player to talk about here is Alfonso McKinnie. I am a pretty huge Alfonso McKinnie fan because I attended a basketball camp at University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, which is actually where Alfonso McKinnie went to college, and that week Alfonso actually was one of the camp counselors, and I was on his team. So, yeah, I played basketball for a future NBA player, which is kind of fun. But even with me being a huge Alfonso McKinnie fan, I have to admit that he's certainly nothing special in the NBA. He's an athletic wing who can guard multiple positions on the defensive side of the floor, but on offense, he doesn't have too much shot creation ability, and he's not a great shooter. Shot at a mere 21% from three last year. For those reasons, I don't think that he's someone that is going to get any minutes for this Lakers team next season, but he has a special place in my heart as one of the very few, the only NBA player that I've ever talked to. So, yeah, that's my Alfonso McKinnie story right there. Now that we have talked about all the point guards and all the wings, we can move on to the center position, or not the center position, the big man positions, because Anthony Davis is not a center, as he has made very clear. Although I do think that is where he's at his best, he also plays a lot of power forward. Anthony Davis overall is an elite level rim protector, maybe the best rim protector in the entirety of the NBA. He also has good enough lateral quickness that he can guard multiple positions on the perimeter. He's a terrific defensive player, was the runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year last year, and he was certainly deserving of that. On the offensive end, I think that he has actually gotten a bit overrated. He's a terrific scorer in the low post, one of the better finishers at the rim in the entire NBA, a great lob threat in the pick and roll, and that pick and roll he has with LeBron James is lethal. However, in the post, it just seems like he doesn't manufacture those easy bunnies at any sort of high rate at all. He settles too often for jump hooks or fadeaway jump shots, and they certainly are not as high efficiency shots as those inside looks would be, as he shoots around 75% in the paint versus 41% from mid-range. So I'd love to see him try to get to the rim more often when he is in those post-ups, try to utilize his good position and strength at the four in order to get easier shots instead of settling so much. But, I mean, that's pretty much just nitpicking. He's an elite player in the NBA. He's established himself as a threat in the pick and pop. He's not a great three-point shooter, but he's around average and can space the floor in that way. Overall, just an elite player, top 7 in the NBA, and yeah, Anthony Davis. Not too much more to say about him there. I think he'll be in the MVP conversation for this upcoming season, probably a top 5 finisher in that awards race. The next guy here is Marc Gasol. Like I said before, I think that this signing has been a bit overrated. Gasol is still very good defensively, even as he continues to age. He's such a smart player, and that allows him to protect the rim at a high level as well as be very good in defensive rotations. However, on offense, he's really lost a lot of his pizzazz. He can't do a whole lot inside the paint at this point. His post game has completely abandoned him, but he's still a threat in the pick and pop game, and he's a pretty good passer in short rolls as well. So he still has retained some offensive value, but it's not enough for me to really consider him a legit starter on a playoff team. Uh, we saw him really struggle in the playoffs this past season against a Celtics team that was playing Daniel Tice, Robert Williams, and Enes Kanter at the center position. I think that Marc Gasol has lost a step, and I'm not sure that he's going to be much of a difference maker on this Lakers team. Finally, we move on to Montrezl Harrell, who once again I think is a pretty good player, especially on the offensive end of the floor. He's dominant. He scores the ball at a very high level in the pick and roll. He's one of the better big men in the entire NBA. It's just that when he's not in pick and roll, he's pretty useless. He's pretty much relegated to standing in the dunker spot and hoping that he gets the ball dumped off to him for an easy finish. He can't really shoot, so he doesn't space the floor whatsoever. He's not a very good passer for a big man. And really outside of his ability as a rim runner in the pick and roll, doesn't have a whole lot of offensive value. And then you get into the defense where he's really bad. Grades down there with guys like Enes Kanter and Cristiano Felicio in terms of defensive struggles. He pretty much hits the double whammy of bad defensive centers. He's undersized, which doesn't allow him to be a strong rim protector. He's a good shot blocker, but he's not a good rim protector. There's a difference. He's also pretty foul prone. The fouls did go down last season, and we saw him be able to stay on the court for much longer stretches of time than he ever has in his career before. However, I'd like to see it in a larger sample size before I really buy into his foul tendency going down. In addition to him not being a great rim protector, number two, he also really can't guard on the perimeter because he doesn't have great lateral quickness and he can't use that explosive athleticness on the perimeter as well as he can in the paint. So really, he's a minus defensively, a huge minus defensively, one of the worst defensive centers in the NBA. And on offense, when he's not in the primary action, he's pretty useless. So overall, I'm not a huge Montrezl Harrell fan. I think that he's probably worth something right around the mid-level exception, so I won't object to the Lakers giving him that contract, but I also think that he'll likely get played off the court in the playoffs, especially on a team that's best off when they're using Anthony Davis at the center position. So while I do think that Montrez was a nice value grab for the Lakers, I also don't really think that he is going to be as big of a difference maker as some people feel. Overall, though, this Lakers team is still very strong. Any team with Anthony Davis and LeBron James will immediately be a championship contender, and at this point, I view them as the best team in the West. Because I am a homer, I don't think that they are a better team than the Bucks, and I have them losing in my current predictions for the upcoming 2020-2021 season, but I certainly think they're a championship contender. I'm very scared of them as a Bucks fan, and I think that if any team is going to beat the Bucks, it's probably this team. I think that Anthony Davis will likely be a real contender for both Defensive Player and MVP. LeBron James will be in the MVP discussion. I think that Dennis Schroeder is going to be a fantastic upgrade for them at the point guard spot. But I just, I don't even have to defend myself. I'm a Bucks fan. I'm picking the Bucks to win the championship. Enough said. I still have a lot of respect for the Lakers, and I think that they are a fantastic team. In the regular season, though, I think there's a chance that we see them not give the same effort next year that they did this year. So I'm not sure that they'll be able to replicate the same winning percentage that they did last year. However, in an 82-game season, I still think they'd probably win between 52 and 56 games. So in this shortened season this year, if I were to make a win prediction for the Lakers, I would say that they will probably win somewhere between 45 and 50 games. Let me know in the comments section down below what you think. Did you like the Lakers' moves this offseason? Did you dislike them? Do you think that this team is going to be the NBA champion and repeat? I know for a fact that my friend Aaron Hockey does. Um, Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Let me know, I almost forgot to say, let me know your prediction for the Lakers win total in the comment section down below. I think that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.